And we are live. Guys, I'd like to welcome you to the Bassin Magazine podcast. Bassin Magazine, guys. Bassin Magazine is the official magazine of the Weekend Angler. And with us tonight, Brad Yoles might show up. I haven't talked to him today. But anyways, I have Vince Richards. So Vince Richards is a famous guide from Western Louisiana, and he guides the waters of Caddo Lake. And for those of you that don't know, Caddo Lake spans the Texas-Louisiana border, and it's famous for shallow water and big bass. So how are you doing tonight, Vince?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm doing good, and I can hear you loud and clear. This is awesome. I was starting to get a little worried. We had some technical difficulties, but also that's another part that seems to be our brand is technical difficulties on the Bassin Magazine podcast. So there's one thing we like to talk about. You guide Caddo Lake. It's in the deep summer right now.
Yes.
Deep summer to me, even up north, deep summer always spelled trouble for me. Up north, the shad are coming around in enormous schools that sometimes, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, my sonar couldn't even get through the schools of shad. There were so many of them. Around here, I mean, the vegetation is so bad, it's even hard to punch through. How do you catch fish in the deep summer on Caddo Lake, Vince?
Man, Caddo's no different than any of the other lakes. When it starts getting dry and the lake's starting to fall like it is, the bite can be tough. We tend to try to find, just like what you're talking about, we do try to find the shad. On Caddo, they'll be in the river system, they'll be in the bayou systems, in the creeks, the sloughs, stuff like that. But if you can find the shad, you can find some school action. You can get some topwater action early. There's nothing better than I like to throw a Berkeley Chopo.
Okay.
Like a whopper plopper, the Chopo, though I tend to love that bait.
I'm sure most people who watch the Bassin Magazine podcast know what that is, but the Chopo is similar to this. This is actually a whopper plopper.
Yes.
I love the white because, we were talking about shad.
Yes.
I've just caught – you have a hard time throwing these up north because the northern pike and the muskies devour them, and then, oops, you just lost another $14 whopper plopper,
So two weeks ago we had a trip, and we got lucky. It happened to be raining, so it rained the whole morning, and man, we whacked them with those Chopos. I mean, it was incredible. Had 3 over the slot, which is, you're probably looking at a 4 to 5 pound bass right now. That, you start having 5-pounders destroy a topwater bait in about 2 foot of water. It's pretty fun because they can only run sideways. They can't go down with it. So but once the topwater bite is over, I tend to get in the river system. I like to throw a drop shot or a shaky head, and I'll find the drops where either boat runs or creeks dump into the river system where your grass lines are. There tend to be shad hanging in those areas, and you just have to be patient. And basically, you have to make a little milk run. You may have 5 or 6 spots, and you may catch 2, 3, or 4 fish at every spot. But at the end of the day, when you get done, you could have 15, 20 fish in a half-day trip. You just have to, this time of year, unfortunately, you're going to have to make a lot of moves, unless the weather condition works for you in your favor. Like the other day when it was raining and windy, we sat in 2 or 3 spots and just destroyed them. So, I mean, we had, for this time, when I say destroy, this time on Caddo, it can be tough. I mean, I know guys that go out this time of year for a half a day and only have 2 or 3 bites. I mean, the lake in the summertime can get pretty tough out here. It fishes real small.
So one thing I heard is after the morning topwater bite is over, you're looking for current, aren't you?
We don't have any current right now. But
Ooh.
but I try to find deep water.
So you're looking for the deepest water you can find then, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a confidence thing. Also, you said you like to use shaky heads or drop shots. What are
Yeah.
you putting on those?
Man, I'll put like a little finesse worm, little zoom finesse worm. Nothing fancy. Just you can keep your standard colors. Just if the water's muddy, a dark color like a June bug or a black or something, or if the water's clean, watermelon red. I keep it
Confidence colors, right?
right.
How would a guy get a hold of you if he wanted to book a trip on Caddo, Vince?
Man, they can go to my website. It's Caddo Lake Fishing and Fellowship. They can find it pretty. If they Google Caddo Lake guides, they'll find me. And
Caddo Lake Fishing and Fellowship.
yes, sir.
Is that it?
Um, yes.
Okay. Okay. Um. So why don't we talk about size of bass? I know this isn't the best time of the year to go looking for a 10-pound plus fish, but what's a realistic expectation going to Caddo for a guy who's going to be out in your boat this time of the year?
Well, believe it or not, there was a tournament 2 weeks ago, and someone had won almost 11 pounds.
Dang.
So the opportunity is still here. That's normally this time of year you're not going to catch a real big one though. I mean you're looking at 10-inch fish to 2 or 3 pounds. Normally a bunch of school fish.
Okay. So a bunch of 1 to 3 pounders.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a chance at something much bigger.
Yes.
But also, like you said, destroyed that. What was that? 25, 30 fish in a day.
Yes.
That's down here where I live. I fish the Atchafalaya Basin. I fish Lake Henderson. Bijou Lake down there. All those places. Like the water's underneath I-10, and 1 to 3 pounders with a chance at a 4 or 5. I've never heard of anybody catching anything 10 pounds in the Atchafalaya Basin. So, Caddo Lake. Last time I talked to you, you said that they had I think it was during the wintertime. You said you had a very real chance at catching a 10 pounder.
Yes. So, to me, the end of November and December are the 2 best months of the whole year.
So, guys, you heard it right there. The end of November and December are the 2 best months. That's the greatest trophy potential, correct?
Well, it would be a toss-up between that and then March and April.
That and then that.
But look, here's the difference. So, in March and April, you've got to be able to lay a wacky worm or a fluke up against the base of a tree in a natural way without spooking the female. I'm making sure you can hear me.
Okay, so you have to know how to cast.
Yes. But whereas in November and December, you're in the river and you're making long casts with Alabama rigs, crankbaits, spoons, suspended jerk baits, chatterbaits, stuff like that. It's a totally different pattern. The wintertime is better for someone who doesn't fish a lot, whereas the springtime is definitely better for someone who fishes more and can lay a bait up underneath a tree, in a natural way. Man, look, you can put people on fish all day long, but if they throw a Cinco or a chatterbait or a fluke and it sounds like a brick hitting the water, they're not going to catch anything. And they're going to be wanting to know why you're catching fish or why they're not able to catch anything, because it's all about presentation in March and April, because of all the pressure that lake's getting. You've got to really be you got to be able to make really long casts and get it up on that tree in the right way. And that's tough for people that don't fish trees. That's really tough.
Yeah, when I first started fishing trees, because I didn't fish trees up north.
Right.
I fished all open water. Well, 90% of what I did was either open water or riprap shorelines, and I would cast parallel to riprap shorelines. And when I first started fishing riprap shorelines, I was afraid I'm going to snag. Well, if you're going to fish trees, you're going to snag. You cannot be afraid of that.
Right.
And that's why I buy hooks by the hundreds. I buy stuff like flukes by the hundreds. Or wacky worms. I get those. I don't ever buy a 10-pack of wacky worms. I buy the 25-pack, and it's expensive. But fishing is expensive. You don't buy a $500 rod to buy a pack of 25 worms for $1. No, I want to buy the highest quality flukes I can buy. I want to buy the highest quality swim baits. I bet you that's another big thing down there or up there.
Yeah. Yes. I love my Havoc. Berkeley makes a Havoc grass pig, the swim bait. Man, in the springtime, you can cover water a lot faster than if you were throwing a fluke or a wacky. You can cover with a bladed jig or a swim bait. You can cover a lot of water fast.
Okay, what is your confidence? What is your confidence trailer on a bladed jig?
I'll put a swim bait like the grass pig, or either watermelon or a darker color. But in the springtime, I'm going big. I'm gonna put a big swim bait on there.
Sure. So you don't like or have you ever used the Zako?
No, I guess I haven't.
Okay, that's Gary Yamamoto baits. I like putting that. I like putting the bluegill pattern, a Zako. And it's like white and orange and blue, and then you put a similar color Zako on the back of that. Wow, actually it was Brock Mosley who told me to do that. And every place has bluegill, brim, whatever you want to call them, sunfish.
Right.
In every place that they're there, bass feed on them.
Yeah. What's funny is if I'm throwing a chatterbait, I tend to have a swim bait as a trailer. But if I'm throwing a swim jig, just a swim jig, I'll tend to have like a speed crawl or an ultra vibe speed crawl, more of a crawfish, and it's I'm thinking more brim oriented with the swim jig, but I'm thinking more of I guess I'm still thinking brim with the bladed jig, but it's just I'm throwing big. I'm going. I don't know. I have more confidence with. I just have more confidence with a bigger bait on the chatterbait type bait. But
sure.
For some reason, with a swim jig, I tend to go small. I tend to go with a little speed crawl or ultra vibe speed crawl.
See, here on the Bassin Magazine podcast, one thing we like to really hit on very hard on every podcast is confidence. And the only thing that can bring it, the only way you can gain confidence is by catching fish.
It's time on.
Yeah, you just hit it right on the nose right there, man. There's no substitute for time on the water.
Yeah.
None. And that's why I love talking to you guys. You guys are out there every single day, or you don't get paid. That's just the way it is when you're a guide. You're on a great body of water. You've been doing it for years. And that's why we love to have you guys on the Bassin Magazine podcast. Now, my next question to you is, do you have cypress trees in Lake Caddo?
Right.
Okay. With cypress trees, the greatest thing that forward-facing sonar did for bass fishing is it eliminates water. Do you have forward-facing?
Do not. I
Well,
do.
okay. What I like about that now, of course, I don't even have a boat, so I can't. But I've been in probably 15 different guys' boats who have that. And what we do is you come up to the cypress tree, turns it. Okay, there's nothing on that. That doesn't mean there's not something sitting down in the knees. But I don't know about you, but I'm not looking for the bass that's sitting down between knees and hiding. I'm looking for the bass that's up there looking around. Hey man, anything to eat? You guys got anything to eat? Or picking crawfish off the. I've actually seen bass picking crawfish off those things, off the cypress trees. And that's
Yeah. So
one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
So me and another guy that work together, we've had this conversation because neither one of us have the fancy sonars.
Sure.
But between the two of us, we've got 19 fish over 10 pounds.
Yeah, of course.
So we just tend to use our gut. And Caddo is such a shallow lake. I've never been in a situation where, a lot of times, like during the spawning season, you're fishing in 2 to 3 foot of water, and it's grass everywhere. I've never seen where that would work to where I'm driving home going, I've got to get that. But now, look, I know it works. I have plenty of friends who use it. Crappie fishermen swear by it.
Sure.
Open water where you need it, but if me and you are on Caddo and we're fishing a flat and it's nothing but pad stems and 500 cypress trees, we're just going to cover trees, and we're going to be in a spot that my gut has told me that that's where we need to be. There's been a moment where we were in the river white bass fishing, and I was fishing with another friend of mine, and he was using the fancy sonar, and he said, no, there's nothing in this spot. Well, my gut told me there should have been something there. We went by there, and we wound up, in about 30 minutes, we caught 11 fish on Alabama rigs in this certain spot where they should have been there, but for whatever reason, they didn't show up on his graph. Now, this guy catches a lot of fish using those graphs. That's just an example of where I know they work, but on Caddo, I've not seen where it's a must where you have to have it. So I have yet to get it. I'm a little old school.
I love that. I love that. So you have instincts that can only be earned through years of fishing the same waters.
Yeah, it's just time on the water. So you'll know when there's current, you know where to be. When the full moon comes around in the spring, you know where to be. If the water's muddy, you know where to go to try to either get out of the muddy water or try to find a happy medium where it's not so muddy. It's just time on the water and your gut. Do I go out and not catch fish? Yes.
Well, that's fishing. Yeah.
But for the most part, you kind of let the fish tell you where you need to be, and you kind of let the lake tell you what you need to do. And that's just time on the water, like we've been talking about.
And that's also confidence that's earned and wisdom that you've earned over the years fishing there. So when you're using a very small finesse type bait like wacky rigging, what kind of structure are you targeting?
Man, I'm hitting the base of the trees. I'm still gonna hit the cypress trees. If I've got a fluke in my hand or a wacky worm Cinco type bait, I tend to fish a little slower with those than a lot of people. I'll make several casts at a tree, and I won't spend 30 minutes on a tree. No. But there's been times where maybe the third or fourth cast, or there's been times where I've cast at a tree twice and moved on to another tree, and the client behind me throws at that tree and catches a fish. So, I with those baits, I think it's good that if you're in an area where you're catching females, you really need to slow down and really work those trees over good.
One thing that really surprised me when I first got down here, I started targeting cypress trees. If you can find one that has like a cut in it and the bass can get in there and sit, I tend to always throw inside of there with a wacky worm.
So I like to look for two trees. So two of my biggest females, which is a 1205 and 1144, both came between two sets of trees. So I'm trying to agree with you on this. I do think the bigger females do like to have cover on both sides of them. So like if you got two cypress trees that are a foot and a half apart, they're pretty close. Yeah, I agree with you. It lay that bait in there real soft and slow and hang on.
Yeah, or a tree that kind of has a little cave in it, that the fish can go in. And I've never caught a big one inside of a cave like that, but I have caught them in the situations like you're talking about when two of them are very close together. I've caught some, a big one around here is like 4 pounds.
You ever fished a beaver dam or just a big beaver mound?
Oh yeah, up north they have tons of those, and if you find one where the water's rushing through it, I'll particularly in smallmouth area, I'll hit that for 15 minutes.
There's always fish around them, always.
And when I'm targeting water like that's rushing over a beaver dam or through a beaver dam, I'm going to throw a lipless crankbait, something I can just work, because that's 100% a reaction bite when you're going through water like that. And I'm going to work that thing and let it hit everything. I'm not afraid of getting snagged, because I also buy lipless crankbaits, 6, 8 of them at a time.
Right.
It's like, one of my favorite stories to tell is when I was in the Air Force, stationed up on the shores of Lake St. Clair, I could buy one rattle trap a paycheck. And then I could also rent a boat one time in that 2-week period. The rest of the time I was shorebound. And that was, I bought the rattle trap and I rented the boat on the same day. And boy, I came running out there in a little 25 horse on Lake St. Clair that has, sometimes has 6-foot waves.
All right. I can't imagine.
Well, I was 20, 21 years old. You ain't never going to die when you're that old. You know how that is. Young men are. It's amazing any of us who, grew to be this old. Particularly us fishermen, it's anything for a fish, man. Anything for a fish. Yeah. But of course, those boys who had that attitude grew up to be great fishermen. Thinking about that, but that's just confidence. I had confidence in the rattle trap, just like you have confidence in the wacky worms. And boy, I tell you, wacky worms. Over the years I guided, I made tens of thousands of dollars having people cast wacky worms.
Yeah,
they caught fish. I gave them a tangible product. They caught fish. They had the time of their lives. Some little boys and little girls caught the first fish. Some adults caught the first fish of their life in my boat casting wacky worms. And I cast them at riprap shorelines and trees just like you did. And I was 1,000 miles north of you.
Yeah. What's funny is when you tell a client, hey, they're like, let's just say I see a female move on a tree, or I had one pick up my line and she let go of it. I'll tell a client, hey, throw it that tree. And when you have a client that doesn't fish a lot, which is fine. Not everyone gets to fish like we do, but they throw that weightless bait in there and they're not really sure what to expect. And then you see that line swimming off the tree, and you tell the client, hey, you got a fish, set the hook. And they look at you like you're nuts. Like, how do you know I have you're like, no, look at your line. You have I promise you set the hook. You got a fish, and then they set the hook and they're like, man, you're good. And I'm like, well, no, that's the bait, that Cinco, that's what that bait does,
I was a little more nervous than you. I'd be like, reel. Then I could see it reeling, and then when that line started to tighten up, set the hook. Yeah. And they set the hook, and that fish just, jumps straight out of the water. Oh,
yeah. So you're dealing with a different creature. You're dealing with a smallmouth that I'd have a heart attack with. Where it gets me is if it's a 7-pound bass to me or bigger is bass you should be happy about. And,
anywhere in the United States, including
So when
Go
you
ahead.
get a lady or a kid that may not fish a whole lot or hasn't caught something like that, and they get, a 7-pound bass on, I turn into a kid on Christmas morning. Just I'm praying to Jesus that she or the kid gets that fish in, because that could be their bite of their lifetime. And
Absolutely.
and if it's even bigger than that, I start to go nuts. So if you get a 10-pound on in my boat, I'm gonna be more excited than you are, because I mean that's extremely rare.
Yeah, I have memories of guys catching 4-pounders and 5-pounders in my boat, and 7-pound walleyes, and I'm going nuts. I actually jumped in the water after an 8-pound walleye one time, and because I didn't have a net, because the guys wanted to fish for brim, so I didn't bring a net. They had 3 guys on my boat, 3 big guys, and they all have to bring their tackle boxes.
Right.
Why? So, anyways, I didn't bring my net, and the guy hooks into this walleye. It's probably about 25 inches long, and man, I took my cell phone, my wallet out, and jumped in the water and grabbed that thing. And of course, when I put my hands in there up its gills, and I could just feel my skin being torn off, and grab this thing quick.
I've never had to do anything like that on Caddo.
I don't think I'd jump in a Caddo, because there are no alligators or poisonous snakes in Illinois.
So I'm going to share a funny story with you. I had a client years ago that was he was a genius. I mean, just what he did for a living. You just talking to him, you could just tell he was probably the smartest man I've ever had in my boat. But he could not understand the concept of the lake only being about 2 feet deep. And so all day long he kept asking me, how deep is it? He says, is this really 2 feet deep? And I would point him to a tree, and you could see the roots. And I'd be like, yes, sir, we're in about 2 foot of water. Well, I hooked about a 5-pound bass, and he got so excited he dropped my rod and reel in the water.
Yeah.
And before I could tell him I'll go get it, he does a Olympic dive into the water, and he pops up with mud all over his face, in his hair, and his shoulder. And the first thing he says is, he goes, "Man, you weren't lying. It is only 2 feet deep."
He's lucky he didn't take a nosedive right into a cypress knee.
Well, he's lucky he didn't break his neck.
Yeah, that's it. Or have a cypress knee go like this. Or
right. Yeah.
Ow, God, that hurts me just thinking about it, Vince.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest. That's one of the funniest stories that I've got. And I was like, "Why did you jump in?" I said, "I could have reached down there with my rod and pick the one he dropped in the water up, because that's how shallow it was." But in his mind, apparently wherever he was from, he always fishes deep water, and he could not grasp fishing a lake that was only 2 feet deep.
A lot of those geniuses are like that. They just have no common sense, but they can do calculus in their head, man.
Oh, this guy was brilliant. He was brilliant.
But a lot of those guys just have no common sense. But man, so a couple months. Oh, it's July. Next quarter, it is going to cool down.
We hope.
Yeah, in November it might cool down just in time for deer season.
I hope.
How are you going to change your tactics once the nights start getting cooler?
Man, I can't wait. It's been so dry and so hot. I'm afraid by the time September gets here, Caddo will be brutal. But you get toward the end of October, it'll start getting a little bit better. You get into November, it really gets good. And man, they're on the shad movement, so it's a moving bait thing. It's chatterbaits, rattle trap spoons, suspended jerk baits, crankbaits, Alabama rigs. It's just chunking and winding.
So you talked about Alabama rigs. What kind of? Wow. So are you targeting the shad skulls with Alabama rigs?
Yeah.
Well, that's a brutal bait to throw all day.
Well, it is, but Man, we've had days in November where you catch 50 to 70 fish in one day, and
Jeez.
it might be uh, 25 to 35 white bass, 2.5 pound whites, and then 20
Woo-hoo.
20 to 25 black bass mixed in with that. I mean, it's just, man, you're right. Your shoulder hurts and your elbow hurts, but um, that bait is incredible. So, I don't remember if I shared this with you last time or not, but I had a trip in December back in uh, 2014 or 2015 where I had an 11-1 and a client with a 10-10 on the same day with the Alabama rig. I mean, it just catches giants, man. It just does.
Man, you heard it here first, folks. Vince Richards with on the big bass, November, December. You can see his right down there, Caddo Lake Fellowship.com. I actually looked that up, Vince. Got the right.
Yeah. Thank you
correct.
for. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say anything, but thank you.
But that's so I looked it up, found the correct one for you, put it down there.
Thank you.
I don't. So, anyways, and guys, I fished for bass my entire life. I'm 54 years old. I started fishing for bass in the backyard because at the time, Dad and Mom were living on a little pond, well, probably 20-acre pond in Aurora, Illinois. And every day, Mom would send me out in the backyard to play, and I just grab my fishing pole and run down to the lake and catch bluegills and bass. So I've been fishing.
That's how we grew up.
That's how I grew up. Then when we moved out to the country, boy, I was down there in the creeks and the streams and the little lakes I could find. Back then, if a guy found, a 6-year-old boy wandering around his pond, even on golf courses, they caught us wandering around their pond when we were young. If we had a fishing pole in our hands, they didn't bother us. But I've been fishing for bass for close to 50 years now. Biggest bass I ever caught is 7 pounds, almost on the nose. But I never, I've targeted some lakes like Vince targets. But man, guys, put it on your bucket list. Put it on your bucket list. Go and fish with Vince Richards on Caddo Lake. Is there a lot of places guys can stay there around Caddo Lake, Vince?
There he is. One thing I was going to add to that, when you're talking about Caddo, the beautiful thing about Caddo is God spoke Caddo into existence. So Caddo is a natural lake. It's not man-made.
Wow.
And it's some of the trees out here, I have been told, some of the trees out here have been, they're registered or however they do it, what do they call it, but are up to 400 years old. So
they were not logged when all the rest of the trees were logged in Louisiana.
No, and the lake's got so much history, man. If it don't have to be with me, I would strongly suggest anybody that's 3 to 5 hours away that's never been to Caddo to come up here one day and or come down wherever they're at and come fish the lake, just because it's just a natural lake that God spoke into. God made this lake. It's not man-made, and there's just so much beauty and so much history. You can look up the steamboats that used to travel up and down it. There's a ton of stuff about it. And then in the fall, all those cypress trees, they turn red, and the beauty of the lake is incredible. I mean, it's just in the fall, it's just absolutely majestic. And then in the summertime, you got all the lily pads, and a lot of people don't see any of that. So the lake has, on top of the fishing, there are a lot of people that come up here just to take pictures. That take.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure you have professional photographers all over there.
They do. There are a lot of people that do the photography trips that come up here just to take photos of the lake. It's absolutely majestic.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never seen a cypress swamp like Caddo is most of the year, guys, I couldn't believe it the first time a guy took me out on a boat in a cypress swamp.
It's different.
You guys from the north, it's like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And if it's like seeing Alaska for the first time. It's
Right.
like, wow, this really exists. I've seen pictures, I've seen videos, but it just doesn't do justice to what it really looks like. When you see a tree that's legitimately 6 feet in diameter and it just goes on and it has limbs that go back into the water and it's got hundreds of knees that stick out of the water around it. And then you just know they're well, guys from the north, we don't have structure just absolutely everywhere like they are around here. Every cypress tree you see, guys, you're going to see there's got to be a bass in that cypress tree. Well, no, there doesn't, because there's 500 other cypress trees within 100 yards of it, and the bass can pretty much be everywhere. That's why, like Vince was saying, you got to be able to do a lot of casts. You do a lot of casting.
Yeah,
fishing down south.
So in the summertime, normally starts around the end of April or May. You're talking about those cypress trees. I always try to tell people, you really start paying attention to those trees and be careful, because around here, the wasp will build big and trying to big wasp nests in the trees, and the snakes will get in the trees. And so, you've got alligators around the trees. And so, a lot of these people that fish a man-made lake that has nothing but boat docks, and they come out here. They're the first thing they want to do is get in a canoe and just go right through those trees. And this time of year, be sure you're looking up. Don't hit a limb until you know for sure there's not a big wasp nest in that tree limb.
And those wasps are nasty, guys. I mean, doing what I do for a living, I get bit by a wasp once a week. And one thing I've learned about wasps is if they start buzzing around, you just stand still. If they're going to get you, they're going to get you. But if you stand still, you have a choice. You have a chance that they'll just fly right by you. If you start swatting at them, they're going to get you. You cannot outrun a wasp. You cannot outswat a wasp. And it only takes them a quarter second to that quick. They can sting you.
Yeah, the last thing I want to do is jump out of the boat in the water.
You can't outrun a wasp. So if they're going to get you, they're going to get you. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. If you upset them, just stand there and hopefully they'll. Most of the time they'll just fly right by you. They don't have very good eyesight. They don't really know what you are.
Luckily for me, this time of year, I'm not really on the trees, so I'm focused on the grass. I'm focused on where the shad are, where the creek channels are, and I'll be back in. I'm more out in the river system, fishing that drop shot or fishing that shaky head. So, I normally when those trees start getting bad, I'm kind of sticking away from them. So I tend to in more deep water where those trees are, they're kind of on the edge of the river. In the river.
So when you're in the deep water, are you skipping over the tops of the grass, or are you punching into the grass?
Well, I do a little bit of both, but if I've got the drop shot or the shaky head or a Texas rig or a Carolina rig, whatever someone has faith, football jig, whatever someone has faith in, I'm trying to find the edge of the grass. I'm trying to find curves in the river. I'm trying to find a spot where maybe there's an intersection where there's two creeks that meet. Just your normal stuff that everybody does all around the country when they're fishing creeks, rivers, sloughs, bayous. Those fish all do the same thing. They're going to congregate at certain points and certain curves. They're going to be at certain spots where that grass line will stop, where maybe the current, if there was any current, would be coming into that grass, because they're going to sit there and wait to try to ambush, shad.
That's interesting. Man, so that's what your confidence is in the. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. You're looking for the deepest water you can look at. You're looking for creek cuts.
Yeah. But even that on Caddo, we're still not fishing deep. Like right now in the river, you're still talking 8 to 14 feet. mainly, maybe there's a few spots on the river where it'll get close to 30 feet, but not very. The Caddo in general is a shallow. It's a shallow lake.
Well, at 30 feet, there might not be any oxygen down there if there's no current.
Yeah.
So you'd have to look for a thermocline,
Right.
and the fish will sit right on top of that thermocline because they're looking for the coolest water they can find that still has oxygen in it. And it's going to be that way until it cools off, and then they have a turnover.
Yeah, that's why September and most of October can be really, really tough. It's because all of that transition is going on.
And the shad are dying, and
Yeah, October you'll start having cool mornings, and you're so excited, and you're like, I want to put my hoodie on, and I'm gonna throw a frog, or I'm gonna do. You got all this, and the lake. The temperature is still falling slow, and you still have days where, it's like the bite's really tough. That's, but man, once you get into November and December, it gets ramped up pretty good, and the bite's pretty fun.
Well, hey Vince, the last few minutes of the podcast, I always like to ask my guests if they have any shout outs they'd like to do. You have any thank yous you'd like to do to your sponsors, organizations, people who help you?
Yeah, I've been blessed. I'm part of the Pure Fishing family where I've used Ambassador product for well before I ever got in with them. And so I'm a big believer in the Revos, and I'm a big believer in Stren braid, Stren fluorocarbon. I've used that for a long time. I love a Berkeley grass pig. The Pit Boss is one of my go-to baits for flipping. The Crazy Leg Sugar Crawl. So to me, Berkeley makes the power bait stuff is hard to beat. We already talked about that Chapo. That Berkeley Chapo, I'll put up any day with a Whopper Plopper. That Chapo is incredible.
Sure.
My boat I get from Plano Marine with Jeff over there in Longview. I got a Skeeter, and it works perfect. It drafts real shallow, and on that lake I can have 2 guys, 3 guys in the boat with me. We can be 2 foot of water, and I can get up on pad pretty quick. And I appreciate that about that boat.
I bet you with 4 guys in that boat, you can still get up and go, can't you?
Man, that Skeeter with that Yamaha show is perfect, and it just rides. It's got big hips, and it just drafts shallow. And this time of year, there's spots where, like, I might be in the river system on an edge, and we might have been in 10 foot of water, and we see some fish schooling up in a boat run or up in a shallow creek, and before I know it, we're in 2 or 3 foot of water. Trying to get back out, and so yeah, that Skeeter can get me out of there pretty quick.
Sure, that's a good boat right there. Because I've been in all kinds of boats, co-angling, and particularly as a rider, I've been in a lot of boats with a lot of different guys. And one thing I like about the modern day boats, they don't skip when you. Scariest things I've ever experienced is going 60 miles an hour. The guy starts turning, and that boat starts.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced that, and that's such a positive thing. The way that they're making boats anymore, such a positive thing.
There's a lot of good boats out there right now.
Oh yeah, it's such a positive thing that they're making the boats safer. They're making the boats more sturdy. They're making the boat so that it's not as hard to get it up on plane. I'm really enjoying that. Do you have any other shout outs you'd like to do, Vince?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, guys, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Bassin Magazine podcast. Bassin Magazine is the official magazine of the Weekend Angler. And I had a very, very special guest tonight, Caddo Lake guide, Vince Richards, CaddoLakeFellowship.com. Just go ahead and look them up, or you can look up Vince Richards on Facebook and get in contact with this guy, particularly in November and December, and have him take you out there for a day. You have great potential for catching a 10-pound plus. And, anything over 7, I'm gonna celebrate that for a solid year.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I'm one of the strange guys, but I actually keep up count, on fish over 7. It's kind of a there's been years where, sitting around at a table talking with some other guys, and we kind of, most guys will keep up with like something over 8 or something over 9 or 10, and I don't know. I'm with you. I think 7 pound up for most people is a really good fish. I mean, that's something to be proud of.
It's something to be very proud of. I don't care what lake you're on. Anything over 7 is a big fish. If you really start to follow tournament statistics, even on places like Lake Fork or Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, Kissimmee, any of those big bass lakes in Florida, you very rarely see anything with a 7-pound average. 35 pounds for a 5-pound limit. It's just unheard of. I don't care where you're fishing. And when it happens, it makes the front page,
Right.
So that tells me that a 7-pound plus fish is just, it's a special fish. And if I catch one, it's going to get a quick 15, 20 photos. Bam, 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 bam. Then I'm putting it back.
Right.
I don't eat bass. I definitely don't eat big fish. Now if you could put me on some sac-a-lait, I'd love. I'm going to take those.
Yeah, that white perch are going to be in heaven.
You call them white perch, okay? I'm used to calling them crappies, so down here they call them sac-a-lait.
Yeah, that is the best. That is the best fish you can eat, man. Now,
do you guide for crappies or white perch as well?
I do not. I've got some buddies that do, and if I get people call me all the time asking for a crappie trip, and I send them to the right people. I know. Sure. I know people that are out there every day doing that. I'm strictly bass.
Okay. That's one thing I wanted to get out in this podcast. But, man, Vince, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to our viewers here on the Bassin Magazine podcast.
Yes, sir. It was fun.
And, yes, it was fun. And guys, Bassin Magazine podcast, Bassin Magazine is the official magazine of the Weekend Angler. Vince, please stick around. I'd like to talk to you for 2 minutes after I end the podcast. And with that, guys, go on out there and have fun this weekend because you only get to do this once.